Thanks, ADIR. So how does a doctor land up in startup world? Do you want to tell us your own journey?
God, that's a good question. I mean, so the first thing you should know about me is I'm kind of a bit nuts. So we've got to put that out there early. And I think anyone in the startup universe who starts off a bit nuts, it's a tremendous competitive advantage. So if you're laughing nervously because it's you, I think it's great news for you. So, you know, basically when I was a kid, I was interested in some weird, different things. So I was interested in programming computers, so I taught myself to code. I was on a sports scholarship and I read the Financial Review at lunchtime. So it's a weird combo. And I did startups as a kid, and I thought as I went through school, when I finished school, I want to be a doctor and be very altruistic and help the world. And so I went into medical school, and after the first 3 years, I realised this is not going to be my long-term career. And you know, in the end, I ended up being a doctor and doing surgical training, and I kind of had this epiphany, which was I need my Monday mornings to feel as good as my Sunday mornings. And my Monday mornings did not feel as good as my Sunday mornings when I was doing that. It felt very repetitive. It felt very bureaucratic. I could not wear this to work, which, you know, I did not do well with shirts and ties. And you know, I kind of decided, what have I got to lose? Like people around me thought it was a huge risk leaving medicine and going back to startups really for me and doing it full time. And my view was, like, the biggest risk is dying without ever being happy. And so I didn't want to run that risk. So I thought this is a much better shot at happiness. So I'm going to leave medicine and see how I go with startups. And you know, luckily it turned out all right, frankly, but there was no guarantee of that. And you know, medicine's a pretty good income as a surgeon. It's like it's a financial risk in that respect.
And how did you land up at Catapult now? And I guess for the audience as well, if you just explain a little bit about what Catapult does and where you are right now.
So, I mean, let me start with that. So Catapult, some people might be familiar with it. So we are a company that works with predominantly elite sporting teams globally. So we have 1,500 teams around the world. We provide some wearable technology to them that they wear, typically in a compression garment. It sits behind the back of the neck. It captures 1,000 data points a second, so it's pretty full on. Goes to a cloud-based analytics platform that is also proprietary and helps coaches make decisions about injury reduction, performance improvement, improving the career lifespan of players, tactical decisions in games. It goes to broadcast now, so if you go to the AFL app, you'll see real-time data streaming from our technology into the app for every game, like where players are running, how fast, etc. We've also got a part of the company that provides a video platform, so all the video that teams collect, they can tag it, analyse it, and kind of it integrates together. And most recently, we launched like the beta of a wearable product for the amateur market, so that if you high school teams that play or kind of Sunday players, they can use the technology as well. So that's the business. I mean, it's a publicly listed company. It's worth, you know, a few $100 million. Revenue 60+ mil. So kind of getting there is how I kind of describe it. And the last thing I'd say about it is today 5% of the revenue comes from Australia. The majority of our staff and the majority of the revenue is US, followed by European, with increasing Asian revenue. So that was there was another half a year. That was that part of the question.
The other half was, how did you land up there in this space?
So what got me to Catapult was realising how hopeless I was at such a large number of different things. And so, I mean, look, I don't say that facetiously. Like, basically, so Catapult was the 10th startup I'd been involved in. And the 10th that had kind of worked, like the other 35 never got past anybody wanting to buy. So, like, I never could sell anything, basically. And so I'd built these startups, and I had a couple of startups going into the financial crisis, and like that was a total catastrophe. So I don't know how many people had parties in the financial crisis here. I didn't. Like, it was a disaster. And I learnt like bad lessons good lessons in horrible ways. Like, finance is quite important, cash is quite important, and like you laugh because like I'm an idiot, right? But and you can laugh at me because like I was an idiot. And but basically I didn't have a grasp because the economy was so good leading up to the financial crisis. Like, you just didn't need to know what cash was because it just always went up, and you didn't need to know what accounting was because you just always made profits. And so, you know, I had this horrible experience in the financial crisis. The business I had then, I had two businesses. One, companies were going broke or being bought by the government, who were our clients in England, and they were banks. I mean, like, so that was unexpected. And so basically I sold companies at the end of the financial crisis, and I realised there's an awful lot of things I'm really pretty terrible at. And like, I sat down at the beach the day after I sold the last of those companies. And I had this moment where I said, so I think all of the things that my personal self-worth are attached to, I'm actually pretty hopeless at. So I better reappraise my sense of self-worth, which is not an easy thing to do. And so I wrote this like a long list at the beach. I mean, it was a horrible moment, right? Like all the things I thought were going to make me rich, they were not. I mean, they were all dead, right? And all the things I thought I was good at, I was hopeless at all of those things. And so I wrote this list of, let's say, 500 things that I could be good at, but like 495 I was not good at. It's like a long list. But there were 5 I thought, oh, wow, I think I go pretty deep on these things. And so what I decided is, I need to focus on things where I can add strategic value and also where I can use like a little bit of charisma and persuasion, kind of some sales skills. And that kind of, and so I started a couple more businesses on the back of, I'll do that and do it with a partner who's good at operations. And I met these Catapult people. I got an intro from a friend and I met the founders, and it was a weird interaction. Like, basically they are as crazy as I am, and I thought these lunatics might be crazy enough to be geniuses. And we kind of got to know each other, and what I realised is all of the few things that I'm good at were exactly the things that they were missing in order to create this big global company. It was a small business, like a 2 mil val kind of thing. And all of the things that they are good at, like I'm terrible at those things. And we really liked each other, and we had similar ethical points of view, which is important to me. And so I got involved. I said, how about I come on in this chairman kind of role and we see how it goes, and we see if we can build this business together. And that's kind of how I got involved in that business. But if I wouldn't have had those disasters and the self-reflection, like I would not have been prepared to admit to myself that I should not be the CEO of that business.
So let's unpack that a little bit about thinking about your strengths and weaknesses, and how, I guess, as founders and leaders in organisations, you go about addressing that. And do you hire in people who have your who are strong where you're weak? What's your sort of approach to that?
Well, it's easy for me to find people that are strong where I'm weak because I'm not good at much. So like the band is narrow, and so ops fight so yes, the answer is I would never do something alone. I would never do something where I'm the guy that needs to be the day-to-day person running the business. And so what I look for is really strong domain experts in particular areas. So there's a startup that I got involved in a year ago. We just raised a round of capital from some impressive people, and it's in market research, and I partnered with 2 people that are 20-year veterans of market research, and all they wanted to do was destroy the way that qualitative market research is done because they hate so many parts of it. And then a 3rd person I brought in who was the CTO of another business I'd worked on with him and we had built and sold. And then I could add just a bit that I can add to that business, which is basically relentlessness and pressure and ambition and aggression and those kind of things, and knowing what not to do, because I mean that's what you learn. And that would be a typical example of the way that I kind of set out to do things now, is to find people that have domain expertise and really strong operational skills.
So you mentioned you had all these failed startups. How do you persist through that? How do you keep going for a vision?
Well, I think I'm a paranoid optimist, right? Like there's this like old Tupac song called "Me Against the World." That is my view of the world, right? I basically just feel like everyone is against me. It's pretty horrible, really, isn't it? But like, I mean, don't take it personally. I don't fight back.
I'm loving the honesty on the stage today.
No, so I do. So I feel like basically. So I tell what paranoid optimism means. It means you assume everything is going to go wrong in the meantime, but in the end, you know that you're going to win overall. And so, so you just expect to fight. So I wake up every morning and I think, all right, what are like today's catastrophes that I'm going to have to fight? And the higher you get up in an organisation and the bigger the company gets, that more becomes your job, right? And like there are no good surprises, because anything that's good that has happened, I got told about that like 5 times. Like twice before it happens and once when it happens and then after it happens. And so there's no good surprises. But the bad things, people try to solve those and not share them with me. And only after they can't be solved and they have to come to me, that is when they hit me. And so I've just got this like thickness, which is, I was a bit philosophical. Like I subscribe to this kind of like Taoist view of the world, but like this is all just a game, right? Like we're just in here. Like my kids, they play Minecraft, they play whatever else they play, and so we just play business, and we have to score enough points to eat and have a house, and all the other points they just buy useless material crap, to be honest, right? And just give us fun. And so for me, I realise it's all a game, and it's just the aim of it is to have fun. And so when I wake up in the morning, like, nothing is going to kill me. I was a doctor. I saw people die. Like, sounds very dramatic, right? But like, no one is on an operating table and they are not breathing and their heart is stopped and there's panic stations. That never happens. No one's died in business so far with me. So, so I think that's my kind of perspective on it is, it's not really that serious. You do your best. You try and take care of the people that work for you. You care about humans, and you just like brace yourself for the daily catastrophe and get on with it.
I think that almost asked my next question, but I'm going to answer it anyway. Do you have any regrets? I mean, do you go back? How do you look at regrets?
Yeah, so I think, you know, what's the consistency of human beings? Like, what do we all have in common? Like, we've all made horrible decisions, and we will all make horrible decisions in future. And that is, you know, think about that, right? Like, whatever you think about your future, it's going to be littered with poor decisions. And like, the more decisions you make, the more poor decisions, and the harder the decisions, the more poor decisions. So like, my future is catastrophic, right? So, so basically, how do I feel about that? So I feel like the best thing I can do with bad decisions in the past is try to figure out why they turned out badly and make different bad decisions in the future. And the problem with success in the past is you have survivorship bias and you say, well, that worked really well. I think it worked really well because like, I am amazing. And so what's amazing about me, these 4 things, but probably often it worked despite me having those 4 characteristics. And so I think that's the problem with success. So I think, you know, the things I've regretted are when things have worked out well, feeling too much of it was due to good decisions that I had made, and not enough of it was due to some circumstances that played into some of those successes, basically.
So what has been your worst decision, and what have you learned from it?
Thinking I was good at a lot of things, that was a horrible decision.
Well, you've learned from that one. Is there any like specific example?
Yeah, not hiring good enough people early. So let me tell you about people that you hire, in my experience. So I tell you what, well, let me tell you this for a bad decision. Experts, you know, advisors, experts. I mean, basically, there's this guy who was an American author, he's dead now, his name's Kurt Vonnegut. I think he might have won a Nobel Prize, or he won something good.
I love Kurt Vonnegut.
You know him, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, he was an amazing guy, very spiritual, philosophical, and he said, basically to paraphrase him, because he's much more impressive than me, he said, like, the thing about everyone on Earth, all the way back to Adam and Eve, is you should be forgiving on everybody because we all just got here. That's a great comment, right? And so an expert that has 20 years more experience than you, they have 20 years. Like, what in the hell is 20 years? It just means they've made 20 years more mistakes than you, and they can give you the benefit of those 20 years of mistakes, but they're not like the Messiah. And so I think one of the things I learned is do not look in awe at people that have been successful and think they have the secret sauce and the Midas touch, because they know a bit more than you and got lucky. And I would put myself firmly in that basket on the luck side of things. The other thing that I have learned though through mistakes is, so staff management, you can never afford to employ the person that you need. That is what I would say as a blanket rule. And so, yes, you know that, right? It's a nodding, a shake of the head, yes, because you're thinking, I can't afford to employ that guy, and you had that conversation, right? And so this is the thing. The person that you need to employ, you can't afford, and the only way your company can be a strong enough company to employ them is by them making you that company. How's that for a fucked up paradox, right? And so by employing them, you risk your balance sheet, because if they're not good, then they suck the cash out of your balance sheet, catastrophe. And so what you need to figure out is, how do I employ someone I can't afford in a way that doesn't completely catastrophize, I don't know if that's a word, my balance sheet if it doesn't work out, so be prepared to get rid of them and give them free rein. And I think that I learned, and Catapult has been successful because there are people around the business that were people better than we should be able to have employed at any given point in time. Our current CEO, who's 3 or 4 months old, he's Joe Powell. He came from Seek. He was, you can look him up.
He's 3 or 4 months old in the job?
He is not a 3 or 4 month old. Yes. I mean, no, because we do like, because what I find is, no, because really young kids, like because, you know, anyway, they're much more compliant. So that's very funny. We brought him in and he was at Seek, and I can tell you this because you can look it up. He was earning like 7 figures. That means $1 million plus, probably 2 mil, and we're not paying him anywhere near that. I got him to take a big pay cut and some options. And so a lot of my job is convincing people that they should take personal hits in order to come and work for the company, because it is so, what it is doing is so exciting. And that is the job of a founder or a chairman or somebody who's got more like charisma than they have anything else in their skill set. Like basically, their job is to convince people that this dream, Didier is like, he's got lots of skills, right? But he's great at this, convincing people that this is a ride worth getting on and taking a personal sacrifice for, because you'll be much happier being on this ride than not being on this ride.
So can you give us some practical tips? You're a founder of a company, you want to approach this person who's way out of your league.
Yeah.
How do you go about doing it?
So you make a list of all the people good for a role, and then you chuck that list out, because if you're thinking of them, they're nowhere near as good enough for you to put in the company. And then you go to LinkedIn and you search that thing, and you go and make a list of 10 people that you can't get into your company, and you find a way to talk to those 10 people, and you say to them, this is what we're doing, and you just are super enthusiastic in your interaction, and you just make them fall in love with the business so that they feel like they want to get involved in the business. And people say, you should always be interviewing, you should always be hiring. It's true, like 50% of my life is just meeting people and having coffee conversations with them. I don't go into an office ever. I just go and sit in cafes and talk to interesting people that I hunt down on LinkedIn, and I say, let's catch up for a coffee, and it's easier now because of Catapult, because it's cool and sexy. And I just talk to them and try and get them excited about the business and see how things go. And it's just about a more targeted approach to that same situation.
So we've had a few people on stage talk about mission and values, and I guess that kind of aligns with that sort of thing. How important is it to you to making those things that you declare, or do you just go out there and sell a passion?
Oh, I'm hopeless at all of that. Put that on that list, 495. So like, so missions, vision, I don't even know the difference between those two things, okay? So I don't have mission statements, I don't have vision statements. Like there is a very strong, good culture in Catapult. I think the culture is because ephemeral kind of culture based on the behaviours of people. I think you've got to know what you stand for. So what do I stand for? Realising that the person you mirror every morning is the only person whose values matter, and you've got to be true to those values. And sometimes that's extremely difficult, especially when things get tough. I think that's it. Like I don't think you need to write it down on paper. I think you just need to know what you stand for, be consistent with that in your actions, and people will see, oh, that's what this person stands for. I understand that's what this place is all about. And I think, 350 people, you've got to start writing it down. I'm not the guy to write it down. I'm terrible at that kind of thing.
Great. Well, I'm sure we've got a lot of questions from the audience. Kate?
We do. But I actually want to ask one first. ADIR, you sound like sense of humour has been a really powerful part of your journey. Have you ever considered a career as a comedian?
Oh, I think I don't have the thick skin to look at a room of people and hear crickets going off somewhere in the room. So, but that's very kind, thank you. And it's a sympathy laughter.
Not at all. But seriously, how has humour helped you and the people around you on your journey?
I think humour is really important, right? Like, humour reminds you that most catastrophe in life is just a game, and you can have a laugh about it, and you release steam, and I think like everybody is way too earnest in this world, aren't they? Really? I mean, like it's all great businesses, but no one is going to. Well, some people might cure cancer, but like I'm not going to with any of these businesses. Everything here is like doing good stuff. It's helping the world a bit. It's fun. Nothing is that important. And when things are really horrible and the emotion is deeply negative, I think you've got to say, here's a deep emotion. Let's try and turn it from a deeply negative emotion to some other deep emotion. I think humour's a good way of doing that.
Yeah. And clearly luck and catastrophe are also two really key words that are coming out. How do they relate to each other?
Yes. Well, I mean, all of us are alive here through luck of not having had a catastrophe. And like, I think, but you laugh about that. And now I'm going to make everyone feel like really fucking horrible about themselves. So like, I come from a world where like, so one of the patients I once dealt with, he was a young kid, he decided he should train surf. And that's a horrible decision. And so he basically hit high voltage power lines, had a heart attack, had to be resuscitated on top of the train carriage by paramedics. And actually, you know what? He lived happily ever after. And like the line between him being dead and his whole family having a catastrophe and that being a forever changing event and him living happily ever after, like that is the finest line that none of us have any control over. And I think again, like this extreme version of life at the margins, like life and death, like it makes you realise like luck is this literally universal thing, right, through the universe, you've got to accept it plays a very fundamental role in all of our lives, and like we should not be too earnest about how much we've contributed to outcomes of things.
We're not encouraging train surfing.
No, definitely. I mean, that's a horrible decision, right? Horrible decision.
So I want to take you back to the business and talent in particular. How important do you think sport is in acquiring the best talent? Is that a really core part of why people come and work with you?
So tell me more about so the fact that it's a sexy, basically everyone says, oh, sport and tech, I love sport and tech. I mean, if I had like $1 for every time I heard that line in a pitch to me about why we should employ someone, yes, there's an advantage and a disadvantage of a sexy company. The advantage is like everybody will talk to me, everybody wants to come and work for us. The disadvantage is sexy industries attract competitors. And so I much prefer, this is like the sexiest business I've ever been involved in, and everybody in this room is doing something that is super not sexy, and when you try and explain it at the barbecue, people are like, oh, okay, like, what do you do? Oh, like you, I don't know, cut grass? That's much more interesting, I'll talk to you. Like, that's a much better industry to be in. So there's strengths and weaknesses of sexy industries, but recruitment is definitely an advantage.
So talking of sexy industries, when did you decide to go global, and what was your thought process around that? When?
I don't know. I didn't think I gave it much thought. I mean, I think it was pretty obvious to me. Like I'm very unrealistic and overly ambitious, and so I kind of looked at this and I said, oh, cool. I think the first thing that we should do is know if we're making money or losing money, because there was no financial controls. The next thing we should do is, so that means employing better people. The next thing is we should go into this thing called the cloud in 2010, like stop selling boxes, be a SaaS business. And the next thing is we have to open overseas, because this is a global market and Australia is very small. So I think it was pretty obvious to me, but I mean, it would have been obvious to anyone that this was the kind of business that not only had global potential, but really couldn't reach any material potential if it wasn't a global business.
And how do you approach Europe as opposed to America? Are they homogenous, or are you approaching them very differently?
I mean, firstly, I spend New York is my second home, right? So, they barely even speak English in half that country, right? And so I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but I mean the way that they communicate and interact, like both England and the US feel more similar to Australia than they are. England is more similar, but like in England, for example, they don't like cold calls. So that's horrible. You can't do cold calls. It's like, So, I think I'd done a business in England previously. I've got a lot of thoughts about how you expand overseas. Like, it's a tricky thing to do. But really, we were very lucky because customer demand sucked us into some of these international locations. And so when we opened an office in the US, which we completely fucked up, FYI, we already
We're going to have to explore that.
Yeah, we had like a group. We had a group of customers, a dozen customers already in the US that had been using our stuff before we even went to the US.
So we can't leave.
You've got to tell us how you fucked it up.
Oh God, I mean, so well, let me tell you what I think you should do if you're going to open overseas.
Sure.
That's a better way to do it. Okay. So one, if you're a founder, nobody cares as much as you, is going to try as hard as you, will like eat the shit that you will eat. I mean, and so it is horrible going overseas where you know no one, in a different culture, no familiarity. It is horrible, being the only person. So I personally think it either needs to be the founder, or this is going to be controversial, it needs to be a superstar that you are prepared to watch die and lose from your company. Because basically when you send someone overseas who is a superstar and they have had all this support and been a hero in Australia, they go there and that is not going to be the way it feels. And if they are a superstar, they are going to establish your beachhead. But my experience is almost without exception, emotionally, they are going to die in the process of doing that, and the baggage that they will now carry with respect to your business, how hopelessly you did things, didn't get a bank account in time, didn't register me for health benefits, didn't pay me for the first 4 weeks, I lived in a tent for a month, like all the things you did wrong because you were clueless, they will carry that baggage about your company and how shit you are at doing stuff. And that is really difficult to overcome. And I think they are the sacrificial lamb of high quality overseas expansion, but it is a horror. And so I didn't do it knowingly. I just look back and I say, well, yeah, that seems to be a common theme. So I mean, but I think you can't, You can't employ some random in an overseas market. I'll tell you the worst thing you can do. Employ a random person in San Francisco to work from home in a market, making calls, who does 3 days a week for your company and 2 days a week for other stuff. And you don't really go over there because you don't like traveling. Like, I've seen that done, and like that's the worst example. And just do something between what I said is the best example and the worst example, and like happiness lies in between. But I think, you know, like if you're going to do it overseas, you got to do it properly, because if you screw up the first market you expand into, people try and expand into New Zealand. It's a beautiful country. You know, in Federation they offered it to be part of Australia, but they declined. Like, it's basically, you know, it's an extension of the Australian market. It's not overseas. Like the first market you go into, not New Zealand, like another market, you can't fuck up that market, because if you do, your company is a company that now cannot expand internationally. And so that is problematic from an investor point of view, problematic from morale, self-confidence. So I think you've got to really nail that first expansion.
Do you think sending over someone from the home base overseas, or do you think you hire someone who knows a local market and can feed back info? Which do you think works better?
I think you've got to do both in an ideal situation. So if I was going to do it today and I was a small company, basically Catapult was like broke for most of its life, okay? And so like we couldn't really afford to do anything. Like I didn't even draw, like I didn't take a salary for a long time, and then I didn't really draw the salary for, you know, anyway, whatever, right? So you know what it's like, right? So and so we had no money, and so what we did is this, and it kind of worked. So we sent someone over who's a fantastic guy. He nailed it, but quit the company, but we're still close to him.
He was your sacrificial lamb.
He was like a sacrificial, much better, like a sacrificial lion, let's call him, okay? He was fantastic, right? I mean, we should not be sacrificing lambs or lions, just to be clear, disclaimer. So he went over, and then we got someone local. And that was smart, but also quite dumb, because we got the wrong person locally. We got someone who was like this, a guy who had been been around the NFL for a long time, and he would have been in his 50s and didn't really want to get his hands dirty and had lots of connections, and he was the wrong person, because really you don't need someone who is a figurehead like that. And so we did two things to fix that. One is we got someone much more hands-on, who was more junior but could go out and hustle. So, you know, hustle is like a word that's common in startups. I believe in hustle. And the other thing we did is, so I went and there's a guy called Mark Cuban, who's a billionaire. He owns the Dallas Mavericks. He's on Shark Tank, which is a US show, which fucking Netflix won't let you stream in Australia. And so from Netflix here, fuck you. And so basically, so what am I saying? Mark Cuban. So he owns an NBA team, and he's like just a huge personality, he's an entourage. And so I basically found out his team was using our stuff, and I cold emailed him, and then kind of harassed him a bit on email, and I said, you should get involved with my company. Like, how about you come on as an advisor, make a little investment, help me grow? And so I convinced him to do that. So that's what I mean about people that are like way out of your league. And so I'm actually very close with Mark now as a consequence of the last 4 years. But like, I was really a nothing when I contacted him, but having him on board, and so then he came on board, and do you know what I did? Just like all I ever said at every place that I spoke, every media article, oh, Mark Cuban is an investor and an advisor to me. And like, I'd spoken a few email conversations, right? And so, and it was true technically, and so that gave us credibility in the US market, because no one in the US cares about anything that happens outside the US. If you have every company as your client on planet Earth, Mars, Venus, etc., in unknown galaxies, right? But no American customers, you don't exist as a company. And so you need to buy credibility in the US. I mean, you know, I'm telling you what you know, right? Like, you know what it's like, right? So you need to buy credibility in the US market. And Cuban, he bought us massive credibility in the US market, and that really helped our story in the US.
So I have one last question to go back to the very beginning of your talk.
Yes.
Are your Monday mornings the same as your Sunday mornings now?
I mean, honestly, so like I'm a nutcase, so like I never really kind of just like coast through calm. I'm 2 steps into an endless journey of trying to find calm, okay? But like, but basically, like every single morning that I wake up, I think, mostly I think, okay, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do today? And I'm very bad. I look at my diary first thing in the morning. I don't even know what I've got on. And I feel excited to deal with the day. I get to, you know, I mean, it's going to be very boring, but like I get my kids out of bed, I get them dressed, I make their lunch. I'm usually home when they come home, like put them to bed, spend time with them. Like I get to do all that and do this business stuff. And like, yeah, I think like if you said, what is the one thing that I have nailed? Because I don't care, like, I don't even like material goods. Who gives a fuck about money, right? Like, I don't buy anything, like I got cars, it's all junk, right? So like, I don't care about that side. Like what's gone well for me. So I get an ego boost because like people are sitting here listening to me talk bullshit. So that's nice. That's a nice ego boost. So that's good, ego. And what else is good? Like I feel like the things that are actually important in life, like my kids only have one dad, so making them not so fucked up like me when they get older, like I get to do that, right? And so I get to balance that. And so I think, yes, I've nailed, that is the thing I've nailed in life. So, you know, that's the thing I'm proud of nailing.
Thank you. ADIR, thank you so much for sharing your views.